All right, please stand and cover your heads for the reading of our scriptures. There's not very many this time. Oop. For those of you who don't know, standing and covering your head is not a law given by God, but it's a tradition. And for the Christians, in case you don't know this, Yeshua, the guy they called Jesus, and all his Talmudim, all his disciples, did this. Took their Talit, which looked a lot like these because they had the stripes and stuff. They didn't have this writing and all that on them, but they did have the stripes and whatnot. And they covered their heads when somebody read the scriptures or when somebody prayed or when somebody prophesied. So that's why, for the Christians that are listening in, why you should do it. The Jews, we do it by tradition because it's done as a sign of respect. All right, so this week we begin with Shemot, which is also known as Exodus, chapter 31. And we begin with verse 1. Vayedaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. Re'eh karati beshem Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur le mate Yehuda ve'amale oto Ruach Elohim becha ma uviti vitevuna. My brain is not engaged yet. Give me a few verses, maybe it'll come online. I don't know. Uve ta'at uve chol melacha lehashov machashavot leasot Bazehav uva kesef uva nechoshet uva haroshet even le malot uva haroshet etz laasot bechol melacha va'ani hine natati oto et Ahaliav ben Achisamach le mate dan uve lev kol chacham lev natati lev, the heart, natati chachma ve'asu et kol asher ziviticha et ohel moed ve'et ha'ar. No, that's, yes it is, ha'aron. Oh, the chest. I'm thinking Aaron. I'm like, I spelled that wrong. Sorry. La edut ve'et ha-kaporet asher ala ve'et kol kele ha'ohel ve'et ha'shulchan ve'et kelai ve'et ha-menorah ha-torah. Is that right? No, tehorah. Ve'et kol keleha ve'et misbach. Really should be Mizba'ach ha-ketoret ve'et Mizba'ach ha'olah ve'et kol kelai ve'et ha-kiyor ve'et kano ve'et bigdei ha-serad ve'et bigdei ha-kodesh la-ha'aron ha-kohen ve'et bigdei banav lechahen. Where am I? Ve'et shemen hamishcha ve'et ketoret hasamim la kodesh kechol asher ziviticha ya'asu va'yomer Yahweh Moshe lemor ve'ata daber el bnei Yisrael lemor Ach et Shabbatotai tishemoro ki othiv beni ubenihem or nehem beni ubenechem ledorotehem ladoat ki ani Yahweh mekadishchem ushemartem et hashabat ki kodesh hiv lachem. Uh-oh, it moved. Mechaleha mut yumat Ki kol ha'oseh ba melachah v'nichreta hanefesh hahiv mikerev ameha shishet yamim ye'aseh melacha uvayom hashevi'i Shabbat Shabbaton Kodesh La Yahweh Kol Haoseh Melacha Beyom HaShabbat Mut Yumut or Yumat V'Shamrus Ra'el Et HaShabbat Le'asot Et HaShabbat Ledorotam Berit Olam Beni Uven Beni not Yisrael Ot Hiv Leolam Kis Sheshet Yamim Asa Yahweh Et Hashamayim Ve'et Haaretz Uvayom HaShevi'i Shavat Vayinafesh Vayiten El Moshe Kechaloto Ledaber Oto Behar Sinai Sheni Luchot Ha'edut Luchot Even Ketuvim Be'etzba Elohim. All right, you may be seated. Sorry I read that so poorly, but my eyeballs are really not there just yet. I don't know if they will be. It just gets that way sometimes. So, Umberto Moshe David Casuto wrote the following. All the directions relative to the construction of the tabernacle supplemented by the instructions concerning the order of the service that would take place there having been completed, we are now told of the appointment of the artificers to whom the task of construction would be assigned. Do we need to say that in plain English? We finished talking about all the construction of the building. We finished talking about all the way the service is to be held. Now we're going to talk about the artistes who are going to build these things and fashion these things and come up with these things from their mind, right? So we begin with verse 1, literally in English, and he spoke Yahweh to Moshe to saying. So you know that we're changing. The words we're using is not subject. Do you remember what the word is? Anyway, it's subject. So we start off with Vayedaber. So and he spoke. But this is the word for setting in a row, ranging in order, words that lead and they guide. So these are not just things coming off the top of your head. These are things that are planned out and thought out. This is thinking before speaking. Very good way to live. And then it says the proper name of God. So God said the word El, which is two. And then it says Moshe. So he said to, or he spoke to Moshe, Lemur. And so basically this is what he said. We're not going to get there until the next verse. So your translation, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, pretty simple, straightforward stuff. We know that we have changed. Why am I not? Subject's not the word, is it?
Direction.
What?
Direction?
No. Remember we talked about it kind of being like bullet points. We've gone through this set of bullet points, and so now we're on the next one. I can't think of the word I've been using. But anywho, verse 2. See, called I in name, Bezalel, son of Uri. Oh, sorry. You hear it? But Uri is this guy's name. Hur, son of Hur, to staff Yehuda. To staff Yehuda? Re'eh. This is to see the face of a king is said of his ministers who are received in his presence. That's a throwback to when somebody came in to be presented before the king. The king had a scepter, and if the king leaned it one way, they were taken out and killed. And if he leaned it another way, came in. So this is of the ones who get to come in, the ones who get to enjoy the fact that they're still going to be alive yet another moment. Because, the king could change his mind any moment. But anyway, that's actually a leftover from that idea. A very Eastern idea, obviously. Goes back a very long way. But that's from that idea of you're in the presence of, you're actually being seen. You've been admitted into the presence. It's a set of light. It's to have the joy of life, because you know that at least for a little while longer you get to live. And they use this word of visions that are divinely brought into someone's mind and all that. Though the word is not actually used for the vision itself, it's said that he saw a vision. So you're using the same word, but it's literally to see something. It's used mostly of perception. He perceives something. Then it says karati. Kara is to cry out with a loud, passionate voice, right? So called or I called, as we so wrongly say in English, is to cry out. Used both of people and of beasts. It's of an outcry. It's even used for weeping. Used absolutely of any kind of cry, even when not articulate. So it can be used of a groan. They're of words which are cried out with a loud voice. So they're passion-filled words, and they are cried out with a loud voice. That's the main thing you got to think of. So when Moshe cried out before the whole audience, you realize there was an excitement in his words that day, or those days, he did it more than once. He spoke to the crowd, but he was excited about, wow, God's given us a law. We get to decide if we're going to follow it or not. Here's the law. I'm going to read it to you. So those would have been very excitement-filled words, but they also had to be cried out with a loud voice because he had a big crowd and no microphone and speakers. And they talk about the mountains where he was being a good amphitheater, and probably that's true. We don't really know. It's more speculation than fact, but no reason not to believe it. He would have needed a little help, you'd think, but back then, people probably didn't squirm around and make a lot of noise. They were interested in what he had to say. All right, so he cried out. Then it says Beshem, which is with or in Shem, name. Now, name is anyone's name. Sure, my name is Rob. My wife's name is Donna. But the Bible doesn't really use Shem that way all that often. There are times when his name was George. You have that sort of a thing. But mostly, if you think about it, how on earth did the writers of the Bible know? How did the parents of Job know to name him Job? Or is it that since they named him Job, which means enemy or persecuted, because the enemy persecutes, so it has actually both meanings, did his parents decide, we want to raise this kid that's the persecuted one, the one that just gets slammed by, some monster demon that the Christians are going to come up with way down the line, because that's not the way it really went down. But in English versions it did, because that's the way they saw things at that time. But did they name him, and because of his name, bad things happened to him? Or did they know that bad things were going to happen to him, and so they prophesied the name over him, right? No, see, the name is the authority. The guy's name could have been Ralph. It really didn't matter. For the story, his name needed to be Yov or Eov. It can be pronounced either way. Job, if you don't know who I'm talking about. But it was his authority. It was the summation of his life. And the thing that he's remembered for most is that he lost everything. And that's more remembered than the fact that he gained twice as much back. It's more the loss, right? Because so many people, as they gain things in life, become very worried that they're going to be like Job and lose everything. Even though the story is telling you that that's not going to happen to you. That was the point of the story. But anyway. So the name is about the authority. And by the authority, you could say, sure, his his authority. He was the king, so that's his authority. Well, not really. That's not what they mean by that. They mean that the thing that when we think about somebody's name, when you have an image in your mind, that is that person's authority. Okay, let's see. I think there's a note that says something. Yeah, it says by usage, chiefly Hebraistic. Chiefly? How about holy? Hebraistic, given that this is the Jews speaking their language, it will be holy. Anyway, WH, holy, Hebraistic. Anyway, it says the name is used for everything which the name covers, everything the thought or feeling of which is roused in the mind by mentioning, hearing, remembering. So hopefully that's a summation of what I was saying before. In English is found a derivative of the usage of the word name, being used for authority. Stop in the name of the law. So we know that there's no guy out there named Law, right? I mean, that is some people's last name, probably somewhere that's their first name, but that's not what they're saying, right? They're saying by the authorities. So you've got some person with a badge on that has decided for some reason you need to be stopped at least for a moment, and they'll say stop in the name of the law. What they mean by stop by the authority that is given me by the law of our land, right? And so there's that aspect to it, but it's really more about the Hebraism, the Hebraistic part that they've said. It's the thing that you think about that's aroused in the memory. So anyway, it says, in the name of Betzael, that's the name, it's a person's name. It means shadow or protected by God. It's got all that in there, but it's just a name. In Hebrew, a name is a name is a name is a name. Don't start trying to read something into Hebrew when you are looking at a noun, particularly a proper noun, any noun for that matter. They just are what they are. An apple, the word apple just means apple. Don't go looking into all this deep insight you can get from a noun. That's not real Hebrew. That's nonsense. All right? You only go deep on the verbs. It's very important that we keep that in mind. So it says Betzael, being the guy's name. Then it says Ben, which is son. So he's going to be the child of Uri, which of course means all kinds of things. Fiery, arise. It means all kinds of things. But in this case, they have fiery. They're connecting it to a different word. The spelling is a little different, that sort of thing. But this is the guy who is the son of this man. And then it says Ben yet again, and which is son of Hur. So let's give us some genealogy here. Then it says Lemate, two staff. Why would they give so many so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so? Were they really worried about genealogy? Not back in this time. No. That's not what's happening. This is a very common name. So God doesn't want Moshe to go out and grab, okay, we got 12 people named Uri, God. Which one were you talking about? So it's Uri, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. That's how you knew who it was. Because the whole idea of first name, middle name, last name, that's not a Jewish thing. It's not in the Bible. So for the Christians, I'm sorry to have to tell you, Jesus, H, Christ, H is not his middle initial. Took me the longest time to figure out what the H was for. I think it's for holy. Jesus, holy Christ. I think. I'm not positive, but I think that's what it's for. And people are surprised by that. They think that Jesus was his first name and Christ was his last name. No, and what's funnier about it, I think, than the Christians thinking that is that the Jews have kind of fallen into the same thing because they read Josephus, right? Joseph is his real name, but they read Josephus. We call him Josephus so we can do the very thing I'm talking about, establish, separate him from all the other people named Joseph at the time. But he says of Yeshua, the guy that went around raising the dead and healing the sick and all that. And by the way, he admits in his writings that Yeshua did that. There's all kinds of writings from this time period that talk about Yeshua called Mashiach, that went around healing people, a good man, a prophet, blah, blah, blah. They're not actually saying that they believe that he is the Messiah, though Josephus's words would seem to lean to that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what he believed. The one that they called Yeshua HaMashiach, that's what separated him. They called him HaMashiach. The people who followed him called him HaMashiach, the Messiah. So it's not that Josephus or anyone else particularly believed that he was the Messiah. It's that this is what he was called. So to separate this Yeshua from the 4 million other Yeshua that lived in the time, because it was the single most popular name of the time, Yosef being the second one. So you had to either say Yosef, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, or Yosef the traitor, or Yosef the guy that did this, that, or the other, the Yosef the guy that wrote all the history, or you just change his name and call him Josephus. Are you following what I'm saying? You got to distinguish these people in some way. And that's what they were doing when they said Yeshua HaMashiach, these Jews who would never have accepted or believed that he was the Messiah. It's not that they're calling him the Messiah. It's that that's what he was called, and that's what they're doing. The reason why they're using it is to separate him from the others. All right. That's what they're doing here, is separating this man who's got a very common name from all of the other people who have a very common name, the same common name. So then it says, le mate, literally is 2 staff or 4 staff. And what is it? It's a branch, it's a twig. So called from the idea of stretching out. They call it a rod, a staff, especially used of the rod of a king, a scepter. This word is used for scepter, right? But it literally means a stick. I mean, if you really want to get down to the brass tacks here, it means stick. It's the use of a soldier's spear, of a rod used for chastising. I was sent out once when I was a child to get a rod for the use of chastising. I don't remember what I did, but I remember I got in trouble for it. They told me to go out and get a twig. So I came back in with something like this long and that big around. I didn't know. I'd never been switched with is that what you call it? Switched with a twig? I'd never had that done to me before. And they laughed so hard they forgot to spank me. So I got lucky there. Whoo, that was a close one. But yeah, so those skinny little things, a switch. Yeah, a little switch like that. This is the word for that, but it's also for the size stick I brought in with me, right? But here's what they're doing. It's a tribe, properly a branch. It's of a people, only used of the tribes of Yisrael. And when they say that, they're talking about only in the Bible. In the Bible, they only use this word when speaking of the tribes of Yisrael. Now, I haven't checked to see if that's true, but I assume since Jusinius wrote that, he probably knew what he was talking about. But if I'm wrong, blame it on him. So, anywho, then it says Yehuda. So it's the staff for the, tribe of Yehuda. So here's your translation. See, I have called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda. So literally it's of the staff of Yehuda, but now they mean tribe by this, of the tribe of Yehuda. Of the words I have called by name, Kusuto said, that is, I appoint this day by this declaration that I addressed to you, and which designates the person by name. Okay, seemed important at the time. Nachmanides believed that since the Jews had been in captivity, they couldn't possibly know how to work with gold, silver, wood. I have word. I was like, what? Gold, silver, wood, blah, blah, blah. He thus believed that the persons chosen to do these things had been given a supernatural miracle. He had nothing in which to base that ridiculous idea. Let me say something here that bothers me. It bothers me about every religion. It's not just Judaism. It's not just Christianity. It's all of them. How come our God is not enough? Why is this our approach? God gave us his words. His words. His words came from the depths of his soul. They came from deep inside. Because remember, the word for mind, spirit, soul, all of that is one thing in Hebrew. And back in this time period, it didn't matter if it was the Ugaritic or if you're reading the Hammurabi Code or whatever, they all thought this way. This is the East and the Middle East, and they all thought this way at the time. Even of the Chinese religions, and that's about as far east as you get, they're thinking the same way. This stuff comes from the very depths of God. If it comes from within the depths of God, how can a man, a human being, find something deeper? Yet it's exactly what we do. We turn to gematria. We turn, which is numerology. We're looking for these deep-seated secrets inside the words, and so we look at the numbers. We count up the numbers, and we find other words that add up to the same amount, and then we put them together, and we come up with these new deep doctrines. No, there's nothing deeper than the words that proceeded forth from the mouth of our God. Nothing. So us trying to be super uber spiritual via some mental thing that comes from the cosmos and we connect into come on, people. There's no supernatural miracle here. You really think that the Pharaoh only allowed his people to do the work? I kind of think his people didn't do a lot of work because they had plenty of slaves. The slaves did the work. The Jews were slaves. They probably were artisans too. I mean, the whole idea is just so ridiculous. But he's looking for something deeper, something beyond what God can give. Get real. Get real. I'm just saying. Verse 3. And I will fill with he, or it, with he. We know it's he because it's a person. We're talking about this guy, right? I will fill he, spirit, God's in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all workmanship. And you see where he's getting this. Oh, it's supernatural. But it says va'amale, or va'amale, depending on what dialect you speak. And I will fill. It's to fill, to make full. The original idea is that of abundance, overflowing. To fill anything does a vacant space with its own bulk or abundance. It's kind of like saying you're full of hot air. You're filled with your own pride. Anyway, to fill a place with anything, to be filled, to be full, to fill them up. Okay, so it's Otto. I'm going to fill him with what? Ruach. I'm going to fill him with the Christian Trinity that doesn't even exist until the 500 CE. Right? Come on. You know what I'm saying here. And why do I say it that way? Am I making fun of the Christians? No, I'm actually making fun of some of the sages because they fell into this. The sages, some of them are as Trinitarian as it gets. Read the Zohar. You'll know what I'm talking about. It's in the Talmud as well. They're talking all about the third person of the Holy Trinity. They talk about it a lot. The Ruach, being filled with the Spirit of God, was something very different back here. And we need to know what it was back then, because people used to say to me all the time, well, that's not what it means to me. And that's Jew and Gentile. They like to say that. That's not what it means to me. Because that's kind of a Western. It may just be purely American. I don't know. But it's a Western approach to things. The scripture says that the scriptures are not open to interpretation. In other words, you have to go basically to a rabbi to understand them. And that lines up with a lot of verses you can read even in the New Testament letters. Because there's a guy there, he's trying to read the scriptures, and someone says, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, how can I if no one leads me? I'm just saying. It lines up. But so if they're not given by if they're not given to if they're not open to interpretation, then we have to rethink this thing, right? Oh, well, the Spirit told me this. Yeah, but that same Trinity Spirit thing that you're talking about has told 12 different people 12 different things about the very same subject. Don't you see a problem here? And you see this in the Talmud just as much as you see it in Christianity. This is something that the inadvertently Judaism picked up from the Christians, and it did come from the Christians. But you find it in the Talmud. I spent an hour reading about it last night in my Talmud. I was reading Sanhedrin, by the way. Where was I? I was in the part where it talks about the Messiah. Anyway, you can look it up. It's 70 something I think in the 70s. In the tractates in the number in the 70s. You can look it up if you like. So it doesn't matter what it means to you. When you stand before God, if God really is going to browbeat us for a couple of millennia before he lets us in the door, which I hate that whole imagery of God. Well, let's look at what you did this day. Oh, and look what you thought right then. Oh, look how you responded in that. I mean, that's the idea so many people have, is that God's going to stand there as if he has time to do that sort of thing or any desire to do that sort of thing. But let's say for grins that he does. Is it going to matter what you thought? Is it going to matter what it meant to you? The answer, in case you don't know, is no. N-O in capital letters with a great big old, what do you call that, exclamation point at the end. No. It does not matter what it means to you. It has never mattered what it means to you. It will never matter what it means to you. It's only going to matter what it means to God. And if we're going to understand what it means to God, then we have to drop all of our Western thinking. We have to drop all of our Western languages, all of our Western viewpoints, and we have to find our way all the way back to the Middle East, to the Mount Sinai as it's said properly, and figure out what did it mean to Moshe. Because if anyone knew what it meant to God, Moshe knew. And we have to look through his eyes. And by the way, Moshe did not look anything like Charlton Heston. Nothing. He was not that tall. He was not that white. He was not he was not that coiffured. He did not walk like a king, talk like a king, and educated like a king. That's all folklore. That's where it came from, by the way, Jewish folklore, not Christianity. The Ten Commandments movie, that comes from Jewish folklore. Because the biblical text tells us that he was a timid man. And by his own words, when God spoke to him, he said, I don't speak the Egyptian language very well, and I don't speak the Hebrew language very well. What? Where's that, Rob? I've never read that. Well, because he said it in an idiom. He said, I am slow of tongue. And somehow the Christians have turned that into, I stutter. That's very offensive to me because he did not stutter. He may have stuttered, but he didn't. What he's saying is, I don't speak these languages very well. You see, Moshe was the slave of a slave. And no, he did not grow up one day and find a little slice of his little baby blanket and figure out that he was Jewish. Because in his time, the Egyptians were as black it can be. They were African. They were dark, dark, dark black skinned. How do I know? Look at the bust they have of all the pharaohs. They're black people with all the black features. The black race was the most powerful army ever known on the planet at that time. And per capita, if you will, if you compare the power that they had to the power that even America has, I think that if you look at, I don't know how to say it other than to kind of use per capita, they're probably more powerful than America is right now. Does that make sense? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. This was a powerful race of people. And they had black slaves. Don't get me wrong, they did, but these were black slaves from other tribes. And they had slaves from all over the East. What they probably did not have was a single white slave, because they're not in the part of the world where white people were at that time. But who knows? One of them could have wandered off course. So he was not a white man living with white Egyptians. No, he was an olive-skinned man. We know because of archaeology and paleontology that he was probably about 5'9" at most. Somewhere between 5'7" and 5'9" is the average for that time period. So he was a short man. He was no doubt skinny, because they did not eat like kings, and even then the kings weren't really all that fat. Well, those kings probably weren't fat at all. At least we don't know that for sure, because they took a lot of liberty with the drawings. They were more about drawing what they wanted, how they wanted to be seen, than what they really were. So they could have been huge. We don't know. But the point is, the Egyptians were black, and he was olive in color. So he grew up knowing that he was a Jew, besides the fact that he was circumcised, And some of the Egyptians did circumcise at that time, but not all of them. So that may have not have been such a clue, but the fact that his skin tone was so vastly different than theirs. I mean, he's brown, they're black. And I'm talking, if you go to Africa now, Oprah Winfrey once talked about this. She went to Africa, and she's standing there, and she says, I'm standing next to the blackest man I've ever seen. She said he was truly black. And we were talking, and she said that she was African, and he said, oh, no, ma'am, you are not African. It's a very funny story. You should look it up. She tells it real well. Well, she's quite the storyteller, so she does tell it well. But that stuck with me. Oh, no, ma'am, you are not African. But I'm saying all that because you need to know who Moshe was. He was a slave to the slaves, and their slaves were not treated very well. And so do you think the slaves treated their slaves real well? Probably not. They probably treated them even worse. But I can tell you that I'm almost 100% sure that this slave to a slave, being Jewish, being of a different color and a different race, he probably wouldn't have been taught anything more than sit, stand, fetch. They would have been talked to like a dog. And his command on the language would not have been very great. And so then he goes from there and he spends 40 years in a land learning the Hebrew language. And even after 40 years, he's saying, I don't do it real well. Because he grew up without the need for a lot of words. So he probably didn't ever get to a place where he was real wordy, if you know what I'm saying. Well, but what about the Torah? Let's leave that for another day. So let's find out, what did it mean to that man, the man who spent 40 years before the face of God? Because if anybody knew what he meant by what he was writing, he did. We have to go back to that time. We have to know what it really looked like. We got to get rid of Hollywood, because even his little poncho probably didn't look like that. A colorful one? Come on. Where would he get a colorful one? He was raised as a servant to a servant in the house of Pharaoh. He was not raised as a son of Pharaoh. Though there would be no reason why they wouldn't call him the son of Pharaoh, because he was in the house of Pharaoh. That's just a whole different thing there. It's idiomatic. Did not mean that Pharaoh loved him more than his own son. Oh, Lord. Anyway, so the word ruach, spirit, breath, the breath that comes from the mouth, the nostrils. Use of snuffing and snorting, because it's the breath coming from the nostrils. Breath of air in motion. It's used of a breeze. Like when they talk about walking in the spirit, they're talking about walking in the cool of the day when the breeze is blowing. Yes, that's exactly what they're talking about. That's what the idiom means. So when God was walking in the spirit, it does say God was walking in the spirit in the garden. He was walking in the cool of the day, because that's when the breeze blows. So anyway, it's used pretty much the way we use our word for breath or breathing, spirit. Well, I don't think I'll say spirit, because we think of a spirit as a ghostly thing that moves around, and that's really not this time period. So then it says Elohim, gods, right? So gods. It's in plural, not because one day the Christians would figure out that there were three gods living as one, three separate individuals living in perfect harmony, blah, blah, blah. No, it's in plural because if you have a god, you have an idol. If you take a piece of wood and you carve a happy face on it, it will always be the happy face idol. If you turn it upside down, that does not make it a frowny idol. It makes it an upside down happy idol. Just saying it real here. Turn that frown upside down does not apply to an idol. So the reason why the Jews use it in plural is not because there's some trend. Think about it. It's plural. It could be 2. It could be 27. It could be 100 million, because it's plural. It just means it's more than 1. It does not mean that it's 3. Just saying it's plural. But it's plural not because there's more than 1. It's plural because he's alive. Your face, it's why they use the same thing for the face. They never say the face in singular, unless they're talking about someone dead. They'd say panim, pane, the faces. Because your face is always changing. Well, you have a happy face, you have a sad face, you have an angry face, you have an all kind, and even when you don't have any of those things, even when you're sleeping, you're breathing in and out, your face is changing constantly. So it's not a face, it's faces, because it's alive. It's not a God, it's a gods, because it's a living God. It's alive. I shouldn't say he's alive, he's breathing, he's moving, he's thinking, he's feeling emotions. We were made in his image, so we feel emotions, we move, we breathe, we do the same thing God does. So it's the spirits of the gods, if you follow what I'm saying there. Then it says, Behachma, in wisdom. Wisdom is thought of as the skill of an artist, artificer, an artiste. It's of dexterity. Wisdom from education and experience from using it. It comprehends various learning. Also of those who are faithful to God's Torah, because wisdom is used to piety. So if you're living according to the law, then you're being filled with the wisdom of God, because the law is the wisdom of God. And so if it's the wisdom of God speaking of artistic things, it means that these people are knowing, they know they know their craft. It's somebody who is way beyond a apprentice. I could think of a student. I knew that wasn't what I was looking for. It's somebody way beyond an apprentice. And when they start talking wisdom in Hebrew, they're talking, particularly in this matter, they're speaking about somebody who not only can they pretty much make anything out of whatever their art is, if they're a woodworker or a rock mason or a stonemason or a whatever. These are people that are way out there. These are people that not only are they good at it, but they can actually make tools to help them do their job even better, or to help them do what would seem impossible to others. We have a son-in-law that's like that. Any tool he needs, he doesn't go buy it. He goes out and makes it. That's pretty awesome in my book. This is the kind of person God's talking about. And it says, uvi tevuna, and in understanding. So he's saying the man's going to be intelligent. He's not just going to know all this stuff. He's going to understand it. And that's the difference. And that's why we move to the word uve da'at. We're coming into this extreme knowledge. It's not that he just knows it, because you can study for a test and know the subject and make an A on it and not know a thing about it in real life. And a lot of kids come out of college in fact, most kids come out of college like that. They have all the education, they have all the learning, all the knowledge, but they have no knowledge of how to use that knowledge, no practical usage. And that's really what's going on here. He's saying it's beyond that. This is a guy who's going to really know how to use the knowledge that he has, and he can just dream things up and come up with new tools. He can dream things up and come up with new designs and things like that. And it says, Ubechol, and it all melacha, all workmanship. It's in all the workmanship that he does. It's not in everything. He's not going to be good at everything. He may not be a jeweler, right? So the all does not mean every kind of craft out there. That's not what we're saying. I don't know where that came from. Not what God is saying, not what Moshe is writing. It's just that all of the workmanship that he does, he's going to be at this level. He's just going to do it at a high level. Of the word itself for workmanship, it's service, hence work prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artiste. I don't know. Let's go into the translation here then. And I will make him complete in the spirit of God. I left out the of. With wisdom and with understanding and with knowledge and with all craftsmanship. So the problem here is the way it's reading in English compared to the way it actually reads in Hebrew. It's not that this is something that God's going to dump into him. God is not going to dump the Spirit of God in him, and then he's going to dump in the Spirit of wisdom in him, and then he's going to dump the Spirit of understanding in him, and then he's going to the Spirit of knowledge, and then the Spirit of craftsmanship. No, he's not going to open his head and dump all this in, or stick something up against his head and make it go by osmosis. That's the way. I don't know how else to translate this to be true to the text itself, but that's really not what's being said here. It's saying that that's who this guy is. In the Spirit of God. Even Ezra said that the Spirit of God is wisdom and knowledge. This is true. The Spirit of God is wisdom. The Spirit of God is knowledge. The Spirit of God is truth. The Spirit of God is righteousness. It's all kinds of things, right? Because the Spirit is what makes you tick, right? It's the very innermost part of you, the ruach, the thing that makes you tick. And so it's all of those things when speaking of God. The pseudo said, it should be noted that the text does not say the Spirit of the Lord. Right? The Spirit of God here is not the third person of the Christian Trinity. It is not some supposed infilling of God's ghost. If a man is happy, the Yehudim, the Jews, say that he is filled with the spirit of happiness. If a man is angry, the Yehudim, the Jews, say he is filled with the spirit of anger. There is no demon possessing a person's body, nor is this the case of God possessing a person's body. This man is already a craftsman. Thus, the reason why the text says complete him, God is going to complete this man's talent so that what he comes up with will be the very best the man can give. And you're saying, well, aren't you saying the same thing? No. God's just going to bring out the best in this man. He's already got all this skill, but God's going to bring out the best in him. Of the word wisdom, Kasuto said the wisdom was an expert knowledge of the techniques of workmanship and the ability to use it. Rashi said wisdom came by learning things from others, i.e., it is not self-taught. For the word understanding, Kasuto said that understanding was the ability to deduce one thing from another in order to solve a problem. Rashi said it was the ability to deduce from that which one has already learned. Of the word knowledge, Kasuto said that it is the expertness that continues to grow through experience. For the word craftsmanship, Kasuto said that the word translated as craftsmanship here indicates that the previous words apply to any kind of craftsmanship. So whatever craftsmanship he applies it to, that's what it's going to apply to. It's not going to apply to every kind. It's going to apply to any kind. So it's whatever he is good at. Pseudo also pointed out that there is a Haggadah, which was written much later in Jewish history, that basically says that the tabernacle and its instruments created themselves. He is also pointing out that not only was this non-scriptural, but it was very pagan in thought. Rashi believed that this was an allusion to the work of a weaver, though the text does not support his conclusion. So hopefully you understand that this guy is going to be inspired. God is going to basically fill him with an enthusiasm. God is going to see to it that this man just thinks about it and ponders on it and really gets into what he's doing, right? But what he's doing, he's already good at. He's already probably the best at it. Although there could be someone 10 times better, but if he's got a bad heart, God wouldn't pick him. All right, we might have enough time for this one. Verse 4, to invent from imaginations, to make in gold and in silver and in copper. So now we know what he's good at, right? So it says, la cheshov, to invent, to think, to meditate. The primary idea seems to be that of computing and reckoning. To think out, to invent, to compose as a song. Speaking of music, right? To think, to purpose, to do something. You get the idea. It's his imagination. God's going to inspire this man's imagination, and it's going to be this man's imagination that does this, not God's. God's not saying you'll do it exactly this way and exactly. He did give some rules. He did want certain things, but he wanted them to be a certain size, and he wanted them to have, a roping around the edges and stuff like that. There were some things that God was specific about, but beyond that, this was supposed to come from this guy's imagination. Then it says, Maha Shavot, from his imagination. That which anyone meditates, purposes or plots, a project, often especially even used of evil, but it's mostly used of artistes, the work that they come up with, the stuff, it comes from their own imagination. Then it says, La Asot. Well, there's your word, asa, properly, to labor, to work, to manufacture, to produce, right? Because he's going to be making things. Ba zahav, you hear it? In gold, with gold. But it's the word that's used of splendor and all that because gold is shiny. Then it's uva kesef, and in silver. It's the word for silver, so they use it for money. But here we're literally talking about things in silver. Uva nechoshet, and in copper. Now see, I don't know. It's brass or it's copper. We don't know. That's one of those things that's lost over time. Especially as hardened and tempered. That's why they use the word for copper. And like steel used for weapons and other cutting instruments. Anything made of brass. We don't know if it's brass or copper. We just don't. And I know that's two different things because I guess one of them has an extra alloy. Not ally. Anyway, your translation for 14. To create from imagination, to craft with gold and with silver and with copper. Create from imagination. Onkelos remembered it to think thoughts. Instead of saying to create from imagination, he wrote to think thoughts. That's kind of the same thing, isn't it? All right. I don't see how we can go any further this week, so we're going to end it here. Shalom, y'all.